I think at the start of our adult life, every one of us has a list of sorts about what we want to do with our life. And I would suspect that many of our lists, although the details might be different, essentially the heart of it is the same. In fact, if we were going to write it out, we all have kind of a noble ambition with our life, and we would probably number it in some way and say things like this: I want to live a good life. Second, I want to be a hard worker. I want to treat people fairly. Number four, I want to be an attentive husband, wife, father, or mother. And I want to be a person who makes the world a better place. I think we all enter into our adult life with those as our noble aspirations. And it's not like we never have, a time where we're not caring about that. We don't, always think these things. We have our rebellious moments. But I suspect that for most of us in the room, those are exceptions. That in fact, when we think about our life and what we want to be able to say about ourselves at the end of our life, it would be pretty well captured by that list. And I think that's true for all of us. And yet, as we move into that journey, as we begin to try and live that out, we make two very significant discoveries. And these are hard discoveries. These are the not so fun realities of life. And they do alter some of what we end up doing. And these discoveries are this. Number one, we discover that doing all that stuff is a lot harder than we thought. I mean, it sounds so good. It sounds so noble when we put it on paper and when we say this is what we want to be about. But as soon as you try to do that, you find out how difficult it really is. And then for some of us, there's a second discovery that's even more troubling than the first, and that is that not only is this really hard, it's impossible. I mean, for some of us, we have these images, we have these dreams, we have these hopes about what our life will be. And then when we start playing it out, we realize, you know what? I'm never going to be all that. And so what do we do with those discoveries? Do we let go of the dream? Do we alter our expectations? Do we just give up altogether and say, if I can't be all that, then I'm going to stop trying? Well, some people do that. But there are others who decide to do something very different. And that is that when they make these discoveries about how hard it is, and in some cases impossible, instead of owning up to reality, they make another decision, and that is that, you know what? I'm going to fake it. I may not be able to be all that, but I want to pretend I can be all that. And the really scary thing is, some people get really, really good at faking it. Have you ever been in a situation or in a relationship that you thought was one thing, but then over time it was revealed that it was quite something different? It was quite the charade. And the other party or the other parties were so deceptive and so good at their deception that it was a performance worthy of an applause. You ever been there? There are few things in life that feel as painful and as frustrating as going through something like that. In fact, as you walk through a circumstance like that, you have to at some point wonder, what happened? How does a person get to a place like that? What goes on in their mind that would cause them to take those kinds of actions? Because again, I don't think people walk into their adult life thinking, you know what? I want to be so good at deception that people want to clap at the performance. I don't think people walk into their lives thinking that. So how do they get to that point? Well, that's what we want to spend our time talking about today. We want to analyze that whole process. We want to talk about the anatomy of a lie, in hopes that perhaps as we discover what this looks like, that we could avoid that and maybe do better ourselves. Now, it does start young, doesn't it? It starts in high school. Maybe your first year in high school. You're getting ready for the big move, the big transition. And as you're getting ready to go to high school, you find yourself thinking certain things like, you know what, I'm going to be a good kid. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to have fun. But I'm not going to be one of those troubled childs. I don't like what that does. I don't want to have that kind of tension in my home. And so you say at the outset, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to go to high school. I'm going to do this well. But then as you get involved with high school, you realize that it's a lot harder than you thought. And it isn't long, maybe a couple weeks, a month or so in the high school career, and you're feeling a lot of disappointment. You find yourself saying, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. Your parents probably talked to you about peer pressure. Maybe you heard about it and talked about it in your youth group. And it's one thing to talk about it. It's a whole nother thing to feel it. And when you start feeling the disappointment of, boy, this is going to be a lot more difficult, a lot more challenging than I thought, what do you do? Well, most kids with any character would say, you know what, I know this is hard, but I still want this. I still want to be this kind of person. I still want to do the right things. I've watched other people tank their lives. I'm not going there. I'm going to do the right thing. And they're able to kind of give themselves that pep talk, and that serves them well until there's a catalytic event. Perhaps it's a party. It's a party that everybody else is going to. It's at one of the nicer homes in the community, and the parents aren't going to be home. So everybody's texting and talking, and they're saying, hey, let's go to this party. There's going to be this great thing. And now the teenager is feeling a little unsettled, not sure what they're going to do. They're feeling conflicted, and they think they can hold strong until, like the best, goody two-shoes in the school is going to go to the party too. And now, teenager feels all alone. And they're wondering what they're going to do. They hate feeling like the outcast. So they wonder, is there a shortcut? Is there a way to maintain the convictions, to be, the good kid, and still be part of the crowd? And it's not like they're going to chuck all their morals. It's just that it's so hard to feel like you're the only one who cares about the things that you care about. And so you start wondering, is there a way to get this done, to do both? But in order to do that, you got to get around the parents, because the parents are not going to understand. They're way too strict. And they just don't know what you feel. And so you start plotting and planning and coming to a conclusion that leads to the grand exchange. How can I do what I want, even if it costs me my relationship? Even if it's a compromise of my convictions? Now that feels bad. When you first think about the grand exchange, it creates a disequilibrium inside, and that disequilibrium has to be resolved somehow. So then the justification process begins. Well, it's really my parents' fault, because they're just too strict. If they weren't so strict, then I wouldn't be forced to lie. Or, Nothing's going to happen. No one will know. It'll be fine. It's not like I'm going to become a drug addict. I'll still go to school, do my classes, go to church. It's not a big deal. And my parents just won't understand that. And you get to the place where you've justified it in your own mind and you make the decision. You make the grand exchange, and when the parents ask the questions that they typically ask, you lie. Do you remember the first time you told a bold-faced lie? How horrible that felt? It was, I'm sure, not my first lie, but I do remember one that was very much like the scenario I just described. My parents were strict. They had some rules about parties and what I could go to, and I was tired of being, the goody-goody. I wanted to go. Made the grand exchange in my mind. So when my parents went through the questions, are parents going to be home? Yes. Lie. Is there going to be drinking at that party? No. Lie. Will you call us in case there's anything, problematic that happens? Yes. Lie. I felt horrible. But I wanted to go. And as fate would have it, the irony is that when you do these things, you lie, it doesn't turn out to be as bad as you thought. Right? You have all these consequences. Oh man, what if they find out? What if something goes wrong? What if I get caught? Right? You have all these consequences that you think is going to happen, and more times than not, you get away with it. It's not so bad. You're like, whew. It does make it easier to lie the next time around, doesn't it? Of course, it's not just his problem, is it? It's also mom's problem. Yeah, mom, the one that lectures the kids about not lying. It's her problem too, isn't it? I mean, can we think about her story? I mean, being a mom, it's not easy. But every mom starts their journey in the same way. They say, you know what? I can keep my work life, my family life, and my personal life balanced. I can do this. Everybody else seems to be able to do it. I'm a smart person. I'm a committed person. I'm going to do this too. And they mean it when they say it. But then the journey starts. And guess what? Bosses aren't as understanding as you think they should be. Kids aren't as cooperative as you think they should be. And husbands aren't as engaged as they should be. And all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, this is really hard. And what do you feel? Disappointment. I'm disappointed that this isn't working like I thought it would. And what do you do with that disappointment? Huh? Why does that disappointment come? Well, I think for lots of moms, it's about the thing that they get so frustrated about because, and it's something everybody feels, nobody really talks about, and I think this is especially true for moms. There's all this stuff they think they should know, and then there's all the stuff that they do know. And the gap between all of that is what creates the insecurity. And for moms, this is like their calling. This is their life. They feel like they should know. But they don't. And they're frustrated about that and disappointed about it. And so what do? They say, okay, this is harder than I thought, but I'm going to re-up. I'm going to say to myself, I still want this. I'm still going to do it. And so what do? Buy books, go to classes, talk to other moms, And all these resources are helpful, but it still doesn't feel like enough. And so at a certain point, they're saying to themselves in those quiet moments, and I mean they are just moments, those quiet moments when they finally have a time for themselves, they say, my God, how do people deal with the stress? And at a particularly weak moment, they finally call a friend and they say, hey, can we do some coffee? Because I'm really stressed out and I just don't know what I'm going to pull my hair out. And they have coffee and they just, mom bears her soul, talks about how hard it is. And at the end of the conversation, the girl sitting across the table says, well, honey, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I can tell you how I do it. And that is that every Friday night, I call up my girlfriends, I drop off the kids, I forget about the job, leave husband to himself, and we go out and party. I mean, we just have a good time. We just forget it all. And it helps. Now, little Miss Young Mom over here is thinking that was kind of a surprising solution. I mean, it's not like she never thought about that before, but she's like, I thought we kind of grew out of that. And yet there's something about it that's appealing. And she wonders, oh, well, maybe this is my shortcut. Maybe this is a way for me to kind of bridge the gap, if you will. She's not thinking, that drunkenness is going to be a long-term solution, but it might help her in the short run to kind of hold things together when she feels this, frustration and stress. And so she's going to kind of do it just for a little while. But there's a problem. Hubby doesn't like the new friends. And hubby knows the history of her past and what she grew up with and the destructive power of alcohol in her home. And so from early on, he made a commitment that he wouldn't have alcohol in the house to honor her history. Now, he'll still go out with the guys every now and again to have a few beers, and it hits her. That's all she's going to do. And she makes the grand exchange. She starts thinking to herself, the real issue here is his traveling. He travels all the time, and if he didn't travel so much, if he was more engaged, I wouldn't even be asking these questions. And this is hard. And he won't understand. So I can't tell him. He gets weirded out by these things. So I know what I'll do. The next time he goes out of town, I'll make arrangements with the in-laws. I'll get the kids over there. And I'll go ahead and I'll have my fun. And she plans her grand escape. He goes, she goes, and the lies begin. And guess what? It doesn't go so bad. He gets back from the trip. He doesn't ask too many questions. Things seem to be fine. As to her part, when she went out with the girls, she didn't go as crazy as everybody else did. She kind of kept her cool. But man, it felt good. She can't wait till the next time to go. But she is a little bothered by the fact that the last time she went to the grocery store, she picked up one of those ready-made margarita mixes and hid it in a cabinet that she knew her husband would never find it. How do you think that's going to go? 3 months, 6 months down the road. Of course, he's no jewel either, is he? He's got his issues. I mean, it all started great for him. I mean, he was one of those, Star guys, everybody thought, very likely to succeed type of person. Graduated near the top of his class, good looking, sharp, funny, committed. And what made this guy unique was that he was not only smart and had all those natural abilities, he had character. He talked about ethics. He was going to be a Christian businessman, do his father proud. He talked about it. In fact, he had a little elevator speech that he would give defining true success as not compromising your convictions. And had a great start, great launch to his life and career. Of course, when the economy goes south and there's complexities that relate to kind of doing business in the new reality, that kind of tests convictions, doesn't it? It becomes harder than you thought. And so at a certain point, he too feels some disappointment, does he not? I'm disappointed. And when you look at the core of his disappointment, you know who he's disappointed with the most? God. God. He would never say this out loud, but he believes God owes him. Because he's been he's been a good guy. He's been ethical. All these other dishonest people out there, and he's tried to be true. He's tried to be strong. It shouldn't be this hard. God should reward that. How do people stay honest if God doesn't come through in some dramatic way? So he's disappointed with God. But he just heard a good series on the soul. So what does he do? He re-ups, right? He's like, no, wait, I still want to do this. I still want to be the ethical guy. He dusts off that book he was reading a while back about biblical principles in business. Starts making that part of his quiet time. He's excited about being this ethical Christian businessman. But all of that is put to the ultimate test when he goes to the management team that week and discovers there's going to be another plant closing. And there's going to be more layoffs. And it's all got to be kept on the down low because they have to make other arrangements so that this comes off well. And as he's walking out of the meeting, his heart has sunk. A colleague comes up to him and says, you know what, if we play our cards right on this deal, we can make some money on the side. Now, it means that we have to make some strategic calls to some, suppliers and customers, and can't let everybody know about this deal, but I think if we do this right, we can make some extra dollars. Now, normally this would not be appealing, but given the circumstances, he's wondering, could this be the shortcut I need? You see, when you're in business and you start off and everything's, you have all these ideals, you have all these hopes, but when kids get into the picture, it's a whole new game. Now you have soccer and elite sports and college funds to think about. And the missus, she's not going to want to move. And this isn't exactly the economy where jobs are easy to find. So maybe this is something I need to consider. And it isn't long before he's willing to make the grand exchange. And he justifies it by saying, you know what? It's not like I'm going to change all my ethics. This is just one deal. It's going to be all right. Besides, the church is kind of going through a hard time. Maybe I could make a donation with some of these proceeds. Everybody wins. I'm still the most honest business guy I know. Isn't there a Bible verse about, being shrewd as serpents? I'm just taking advantage of the economy, the way that things are, free markets. And it's just one deal. And he makes the call, makes the exchange. And guess what? It's not so bad. He doesn't get caught. Nobody knows, at least not now. Of course, they didn't make as much money as they thought, and they had to tell a few more lies and half-truths to pull the whole thing together. And yeah, he felt some twinge of guilt when one of the co-conspirators said, boy, the church would sure be surprised if they knew where this money was coming from. That didn't feel so good. And of course, now there's this whole new tax liability thing that I got to figure out. That's all right. We'll figure it out. It'll be okay. The deal is done. Now, are you surprised by any of these stories? Are these uncommon? No, they happen all the time, right? We see them all the time. We hear about them all the time. In fact, perhaps what's most troubling is not that this happens, but that we seem to be increasingly okay with the fact that they do. We're not surprised that this happens. We're not surprised that it happens in the world. Truth be known, we're not even all that surprised it happens around the church. And can we just for a moment think about the implications of that? If this is happening all the time in various arenas with all kinds of people, consider the multiplied effect of this kind of reasoning. Is it any wonder that when we look at the Middle East, we have rogue leaders lying about nuclear capabilities? I mean, think about the implications of that for just a moment. Or that our politicians on both sides of the aisle are lying incessantly about health care. Or that the general public thinks it's hilarious when one of our late-night talk show hosts is having affairs with women on his staff in spite of the fact that he's married. And can we take it out of the stratosphere? Can we just kind of talk about our own lives for just a minute? I mean, you and I, and what our life looks like when this is the norm. When we excuse it in ourselves and we excuse it in everyone around us. How the heck do we do life? How the heck do we do life when we don't know who to trust? How do we do life when nothing is as it seems? How do we do life when everything and everyone has become plastic?